still got energy for one last story? Well, when I was a kid, the thing that I loved most about those holiday family gatherings was sitting at the table when dinner was over and listening to my dad and my uncle tell stories about growing up outside of Chicago in the 30s and 40s. And I really loved when they would tell stories about my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Nelson, who was a shanty Irishman who ended up settling in Rising Sun, Indiana, when the barge he was on, floating down the Ohio River, was attacked by pirates. Don't you know? So when my uncle said he wanted to trace our family tree back to the Irish roots, I was all in. And my assignment was to call Virginia, our cousin, who still lives in Rising Sun, Indiana. She's a delightful woman. She's really a family historian. She told me some fabulous stories about branches of the family I never knew existed. But finally she said, you know, a couple of years ago, another girl called me, and she was asking me a lot of similar questions, and she seemed to know a lot about our family tree and genealogy, and I think you should talk to her. So she gave me her address, not her email address, not her phone, her mailing address. Well, this was back in the mid-90s, and I probably had had a personal computer at home for a couple of years, and I was just starting to explore this World Wide Web thing. So I took this address, and I got home, and I went out onto whitepages.com. Now, today, whitepages.com is a worthless piece of crap. But back then, before people wanted to get their information off the internet, you could actually find phone numbers using whitepages.com. So I found a phone number and I called her, and there was an answering machine. It sounded like a business. It didn't really sound like a residence. But I left a message and I waited, didn't hear anything. I went back, widened my search. I found a couple of other numbers that were possibilities. Disconnected, no answer. So then I was really bummed. I thought we had had such a good start on this family tree thing, but now I was hitting a dead end. But then I got a crazy idea. It wouldn't be a crazy idea now. Now it would be the first thing I would do. But back then, what did they have? Maybe like 1/trillionth of the content on the internet that they have now. But I was desperate. And I said, you know, she spells her name a little bit in an odd way, so I'm just going to put it in and Google. No, I wouldn't have Googled her. There was no Google back then. I would have Alta Vista'd her. So I put in Laurie Stedman genealogy. And lo and behold, some pages started coming up that talked about a Mayflower database. And if any of you've done genealogy work, Mayflower database is like the bomb. So I thought, okay, I think we might be onto something here. So I looked at the pages and I found finally a, information contact, L. Stedman, blah, blah, blah. I sent an email. And I said, by any chance, are you the Laurie Stedman that's related to the Nelsons in Rising Sun, Indiana? And I got an email back that said, yes, it's me! So I said, well, I'm your cousin, and I'm doing some research on the Nelsons. And she said, I've got it all done. I've traced all the Nelsons back to when John Nelson came over from Ireland in 1802. It's on an electronic file, and I will send it to you. And she did. And I felt a little bit like that first person that probably picked up Alexander Graham Bell's telephone thingy and talked to a human being on the other side of town and realized that it's not only a small world, it's a small virtual world. So, fast forward 20 years later, my dad is 87 years young. And a couple of years ago, for his 85th birthday, my sister and I planned a road trip to Indiana. And we rented a car and we drove the state. We went to all those spots where our family had history and events that had happened. We went to Indiana University where he went to college. And we went to Chicago and saw his cousins. And these cousins, their dad, Uncle Joe, ran the Big House, the gambling establishment for Al Capone in Gary, Indiana. And if you can think of a theme for that, I'll come back and tell that story another time. But we ended up the trip in Rising Sun, and I wanted to go to the cemetery where John and Nancy Nelson were buried. And Lori had sent me a photograph of the old moss-covered stones, so I had it in my mind that it was this old church with the graveyard with the fence on the hill and a few moldy, crumbling monuments. But we got there, and it was the actual, like current cemetery for this town. It's not a very big town, but it was still a pretty big cemetery with a lot of headstones. And we had to be at the airport in like 2 hours. So once again, Lori to the rescue. But this time, cell phones and texting, she drew actual diagrams of the plots with the numbers and explained how cemeteries worked. It's really amazing. And we all split up with our little maps, and we finally honed in on the headstones of John and Nancy Nelson. And to stand there with my 85-year-old dad and my sister and my cousin Mark there with those ancestors, the first ones that had come to America over 200 years ago, it was really a special gift. And a gift that really came by way of a very special lady that to this day I've never met. But technology is making it such a small world in some ways, but also bringing with it some fabulous opportunities that, really probably would never have happened 50 years ago. And I hope that one day I will meet Lori, and I have a feeling it's going to be in Ireland, and we're going to continue some genealogy research over there. So thank you very much.
Carolyn, everybody.